Well, another question I wanted to get you to talk about a little bit.
Are we on?
We are on.
Oh.
We are rolling.
Aye.
We're going. And another question I wanted to get you to talk about is something that you touch on this in Unceasing Worship. And I think it's something that, that as conversations continue to emerge in the church about the arts, more and more churches are, the art gallery is the new coffee shop. That's the thing I'm finding myself, that more and more churches are, in the late 90s, they were all opening coffee shops, and now they're all starting art galleries. And I think there's great things about that, and there's troubling things, and then there's outright problems that are coming along with that. So with this ongoing and emerging conversation about the arts, one of the things that's coming up again is the nature of beauty. And with that conversation comes Schaeffer and Rookmacher and C.S. Lewis. And like I said, you've talked about this in Unceasing Worship. I'd love for you to just take a few minutes and walk us through your understanding of beauty and connect that to your understanding of when the scriptures talked about the beauty of holiness.
Okay, let me try that. It's really, it's fun in the best sense of the word to talk about that, and it's scary. Let me begin backwards by talking about the beauty of holiness. I think that when we read that in Psalm 29, worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness, we're talking about a beauty that transcends anything that we would know about down here, anything that would in any sense parallel an aesthetic theory or a doctrine of beauty that has grown up through whatever philosophical school or has been filtered through whatever cultural mechanism there is. The beauty of holiness is the condition that God is eternally in his unapproachable purity. And the strongest weak word, or the weakest strong word you can use for that, in one sense, is beauty. It's its own kind of beauty for which there is no parallel, for which there is no duplicate. It is a unique word describing a uniqueness. And we do wrong to try to reinsert the word beauty from Psalm 29 into the practice of the arts in any way to identify the arts as a reflection of the beauty of God, by virtue of which then we equate beauty and holiness, an earthbound concept of beauty, philosophically bound concept of beauty, with the holiness of God, for which there is no equal, of which we know nothing at this point, except obliquely through the blessed work of the Spirit in our hearts. So we have to be sure that we separate our use of the word beauty from its theological rootings in the character of God. And then if we want to use it in an earthbound way, we move it over into an entirely different domain and begin to talk about the beauty of things. But the interesting thing about beauty in its earthbound sense is there is no absolute. There is no absolute beauty. Beauty is a matter of degree within kind, so that I have to say, well, yeah, Bach wrote the B minor Mass. That has more beauty than the cantata Ein Festborg that he wrote. It, to me, is more beautiful. Well, what do you mean by that? Isn't beauty an absolute? No, it's not. This is more beautiful than that. In God's creation, one could argue that pine tree A is more beautiful than pine tree B. The creation is fallen. There is disequality, there's total relativity among created things. So beauty becomes something very, very dodgy, very wonderful to pursue, hard to define, and it's always a matter of degree, and it's culturally entombed or encased, and it shifts, and sometimes it's a word that we would rather not use and talk about art in other terms than the word beauty, because that word is so unloaded on the one hand, and what did I say? Loaded on the one hand and unloaded on the other. It's a totally different thing. Beauty is relativity down here, and then of course, why is it that let's say Bob Smith can fall in love with a girl that some people think is outrightly ugly, and he said, "Oh man, she's beautiful."
Mm-hmm.
How do we account for that?
Mm-hmm.
There's something incredibly, wonderfully chemical about the exchange of attributes and our perceptions of this, that, and the other thing, by virtue, excuse me, of which we use the single word beauty. I just don't think it needs to be used anymore or that much in describing church music.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you look at beauty sort of cross culturally, and the definitions shift.
Yep, absolutely.
You look at particularly the Japanese traditions, and Makoto Fujimura writes about that that the Japanese tradition of beauty always involves something that is broken, something that is in decay. That perfection, sort of the Western ideal of beauty being the perfected form, doesn't translate, to beauty in the East.
Yeah, and the Western idea of beauty as a perfected thing is absolutely not Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And even though one might argue that maybe the Japanese paradigm is maybe not Christian, I would say it's more Christian than the Western ideal of some sort of abstracted perfection. And because we have attached the word beauty to high art, especially high art, we have built a whole civilization of neurotics, and their names are artists, and they're partly neuroticized by the very fact that they are to strive for beauty and they do not know what it is. It's some abstract, invisible perfection toward which everybody should strive. And when they can't do it, they hurt. And it's ever so dangerous. Academia is loaded with this, and to the detriment of the making of art.
I want to ask a question that's related to this, that I think points in another direction and points to some of the difficulties. And that's this: if beauty is relative in creation, and that created things are beautiful in the sense that they're relative to others, and that's highly subjective. And that my favorite Beatles record might be the White Album and yours might be Abbey Road, and neither one of us is wrong. Yet
You're both wrong.
yet the Beatles rise to the top, and Bach stands alone. Cormac McCarthy rises to the top.
Do you read him?
I love
him. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely. These
I don't know who that is.
Yeah. Well, we'll educate you later. Right now, we're ministering.
I've got a book I'll let you borrow. In thinking even like in theological terms, Jonathan Edwards, his writings, they rise to the top. What if all of this is subjective and relative and all of this, then there's something in all of this that means excellence, and excellence does stand out. Help me make sense
It's
of all that.
dodgy. He said it's dodgy, but it's not without meaning.
And I think if they rise to the top, the only thing you can say is they represent the more than, but not the absolute. Because nobody can say that there wasn't somebody who lived contemporaneously with Jonathan Edwards, whose writings were lost, and he really tops Jonathan Edwards. So to say that this or that person rises to the top is simply to think pyramidically rather than absolutely. And so you have the top of the pyramid with this wonderful underpinning of supposedly less than the top, but nonetheless the pyramid is holistic, and the guy that got to the top didn't get to the top by imitating greatness as much as by imitating and learning to paraphrase somebody somewhere else down the pile. What interests me is how many friends the great composers had, and that those friends were composers, and now they've been relegated to mediocrity by the historians. Brahms had as his best friend Chervenka, whose concerti and his symphonic works are considered to be sort of second, third-rate romanticism. Bach had a counterpoint student named Ludwig Krebs, who was a cousin of Bach's, and Bach used to pun about his name. Krebs means crab, and Bach means brook, so Krebs was the best crab in the brook, Bach used to say jocularly, and we don't laugh now because it's not funny anymore. But it's still a historical fact. The point being that he said Krebs is the best Krebs is the best crab in the brook, and he said that honestly, thinking that Krebs was really a very fine composer. And he can't even match his cousin's work. So it's interesting to me that people who are at the top have a lot of friends who aren't, and they really respect them. The bad thing about art history and art criticism is that we refuse that wonderful communion of the best having company with the good, and we relegate the good to the trash heap and keep the best not at the top of the pyramid, but as kind of a star that's just hung there by virtue of their own opinion. So that it would be a way to think.